The grand hall of the interstellar assembly was suffused with an eerie hum. Soft beams of azure light illuminated the chamber, reflecting off polished obsidian walls that stretched endlessly upward. In the center of the room stood Ambassador Lennox, his shoulders squared, but his expression betrayed the weight of the challenge just issued. "The Trevel delegation demands satisfaction through the right of solitude," announced the chamber's AI arbiter, its mechanical voice cold and impartial. The phrase hung in the air like a death knell. The humans in the room exchanged uneasy glances. The right of solitude was a duel, a fight to settle disputes when diplomacy failed. For centuries, the Trevel had perfected the art of combat, earning a reputation as the most formidable warriors in the galaxy. Humanity, by comparison, was the newest addition to the assembly, known for their creativity but not their martial prowess. Lennox cleared his throat. "We accept the challenge," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. Refusal wasn't an option. Earth's pride, and perhaps its place in the assembly, was at stake. A ripple of interest passed through the alien delegates. Among them stood Ralcath Tyros, the dual master of the Trevel. Clad in ceremonial armor adorned with glowing sigils, he towered over the room, his crimson eyes glinting with disdain. "Your acceptance is noted, Ambassador," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Choose your champion wisely. It will be their last day among the living. Carter Hale?" Lennox's tone was incredulous as he stared at the man before him. The former Marine leaned casually against the frame of the ambassador's office window, his gaze fixed on the bustling spaceport outside. At 32, Carter had the wiry frame of someone who had seen their share of battles and survived. His dark hair was cropped short, and a faint scar ran along his jawline, a relic of a skirmish on Titan. He turned, a faint smirk playing on his lips. "You rang? This isn't a joke," Lennox snapped. "Do you even understand what's at stake? Earth's reputation." "Relax," Carter interrupted, his tone infuriatingly calm. "I read the brief. One-on-one duel. Big scary alien. Don't die. Got it." Lennox's hands clenched into fists. "You're not taking this seriously." Carter's smirk faded. "I'm taking it very seriously, Ambassador. But panicking won't help. I'm your best shot, and you know it." The room fell silent. Lennox hated to admit it, but Carter was right. As a Marine, he had been an exceptional close-quarters combatant. After retiring, he had turned his skills into an unexpected career as a fencing instructor, blending human ingenuity with ancient techniques. "Do you even know what you're up against?" Lennox asked finally. "Not yet," Carter replied. "But I'm guessing they don't fight like us." The training chamber aboard the human embassy's ship was stark and utilitarian, its walls lined with racks of weapons from Earth's history. Carter examined a long sword, its polished blade catching the light. "Primitive," a voice remarked from behind him. Carter turned to see Kailesh, an elder of the Zadrath species and one of the Assembly's few impartial historians. The alien's elongated features were framed by a cascade of silver tendrils that shimmered as he moved. "Thanks for the vote of confidence," Carter said dryly. Kailesh's eyes narrowed. "The Trevel will not respect you or your methods. Their techniques are refined over millennia, built on precision and discipline. They view unpredictability as weakness." "Good," Carter said, testing the weight of the sword. "That means they won't see me coming." Kailesh tilted his head, intrigued. "You believe unpredictability is an advantage?" "I know it is," Carter replied. "Humans aren't the strongest or fastest species. But we adapt. We improvise. And we don't back down, no matter how bad the odds look." Kailesh studied him for a moment, then nodded. "You may have a chance yet. I will provide you with insights into Ralcatha's techniques. Use them wisely." On the day of the duel's announcement, the conclave's amphitheater buzzed with anticipation. Delegates from dozens of species filled the tiered seats, their conversations a symphony of languages. At the center of the arena, the duel master himself stood motionless, his armor gleaming under the artificial sun. Ralcatha's imposing figure radiated an aura of invincibility. As Carter entered the arena, The noise subsided into an expectant hush. He wore no armor, only a simple combat suit and a steel sword sheathed at his side. His choice of weapon elicited snickers from the crowd. "Is this your champion?" Ralcath asked, his voice echoing across the amphitheater. His lips curled into a sneer. "A human with a relic? I expected at least a modicum of creativity." Carter shrugged. "Why fix what isn't broken?" The audience erupted into laughter, though Ralcath's expression darkened. He stepped forward, towering over Carter. "You will regret your insolence, Terran." "Maybe," Carter replied, meeting his gaze unflinchingly. "But not today." The arena fell silent as the arbiter spoke. "The duel shall commence tomorrow at dawn. Prepare yourselves." That night, Carter sat alone in the embassy's observation deck, staring out at the stars. The weight of the challenge loomed over him, but he refused to let it crush him. He thought of Earth, of the sprawling cities, the forests, the people who had never asked for him to carry this burden but who depended on him now. A soft hum signaled Lennox's arrival. The ambassador hesitated before sitting across from him. "You don't have to do this, you know," Lennox said quietly. "We could negotiate. And let them walk all over us." Carter shook his head. "This isn't just about me or the duel. It's about sending a message. If we back down now, we'll never be taken seriously." Lennox sighed. "You're risking everything." Carter smiled faintly. "That's what makes it worth doing." As dawn approached, Carter rose from his seat, his resolve solidified. The duel would be a test, not just of skill, but of humanity's place in the galaxy. And he intended to win. The arena's training wing was a labyrinth of echoing halls and chambers, each filled with the clamor of warriors honing their skills. Carter Hale, however, had carved out a quiet corner, the hum of his long sword slicing through the air the only sound in the room. He practiced with methodical precision, his movements fluid yet deceptively simple. "Is this how you prepare to face a legend?" Kalesh's voice broke the silence as the alien historian stepped into the room, his silver tendrils swaying with amusement. Carter paused mid-swing and turned, resting the tip of his blade on the floor. "Unless you've got a plasma saber lying around, this will have to do." Kalesh moved closer, his elongated fingers tracing the air as if weaving an invisible tapestry. "Ralcath doesn't wield mere plasma, Terran. His weapon, the Zethro-Fong, is an extension of his body, a living blade that shifts to his will." Carter raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like cheating." "It is tradition," Kalesh corrected, his tone carrying both reverence and a hint of disdain. "The Trevel see their tools as sacred. To them, your steel sword is an insult." "Good," Carter said with a faint smirk. "Let's keep insulting them." Kalesh chuckled, his tendrils shimmering. "You truly are unpredictable. Perhaps that is why you intrigue me." He gestured to a nearby console. "Come. There is much to learn if you wish to survive." The holographic display flickered to life, projecting an image of Ralcath in the midst of battle. The duel master's movements were impossibly fast, his blade a blur of glowing energy. With each strike, the Zethro-Fong transformed, elongating into a spear, curving into a scythe, or splitting into twin blades. Carter watched intently, his expression unreadable. "Versatile weapon. But every transformation has a purpose. What's his pattern?" Kalesh tilted his head. "Pattern? Every fighter has one," Carter explained, his tone sharpening. "Even the best. A tendency, a rhythm, something they fall back on under pressure. What does he do when he thinks he's about to win?" Kalesh studied the footage, his silver eyes narrowing. "He becomes overconfident. When he senses victory, he uses the Fong's spear form to finish his opponent. It is the form that has claimed the most lives." Carter leaned back, his fingers drumming against the console. "Overconfidence. That's the opening." Kalesh regarded him with curiosity. "You plan to bait him?" "Exactly. Make him think I'm outmatched, then exploit the gap when he gets cocky." "Bold," Kalesh remarked, a note of admiration in his voice. "But dangerous. You are betting everything on his pride." Carter grinned. Pride's a hell of a blind spot. The next morning, the arena's amphitheater buzzed with activity as spectators gathered to witness the duel's preparations. The air was thick with tension, the anticipation of bloodshed palpable. In the staging area, Carter adjusted the grip of his sword, its weight familiar and comforting. Lennox paced nearby, his worry etched into every line of his face. "You're really going through with this?" the ambassador said, his voice barely above a whisper. Carter glanced at him, his expression steady. "It's not like I have much of a choice." "There's always a choice," Lennox argued, his frustration breaking through. "We could forfeit, find another way to negotiate." "Stop," Carter interrupted, his tone firm but not unkind. "You know as well as I do that forfeiting means losing more than the duel. We'd lose respect, leverage, everything." Lennox sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Just try not to die." Carter smirked. "I'll do my best." As the arena filled to capacity, Carter was led to the combat circle, a vast expanse of polished stone surrounded by towering obelisks that pulsed with energy. The crowd's roar was deafening, a cacophony of cheers, jeers, and alien chants. Across the circle, Ralcath Tyros emerged, his presence commanding. His armor gleamed, its intricate patterns glowing faintly with each step. In his hand, the Zethro Fong shimmered, shifting between forms as if alive. He radiated an air of unshakable confidence. Carter stepped into the circle, his plain attire and steel sword stark contrasts to Ralcath's grandeur. The difference wasn't lost on the crowd, who erupted into laughter and derision at the sight of the human challenger. Ralcath's lips curled into a sneer. "Is this the best your species can offer? A primitive weapon wielded by a lesser being?" Carter shrugged, his grip on the hilt relaxed. "Figured I'd keep things simple." Ralcath laughed, the sound echoing ominously. "Your simplicity will be your undoing." The arbiter's mechanical voice cut through the noise. "Combatants, take your positions. The duel will commence in 30 seconds. Carter's mind was a calm sea as he stepped into his designated spot. He took a deep breath, tuning out the crowd, the noise, even Ralcath's imposing figure. His focus narrowed to the task at hand, survival. The arbiter's countdown began, each number thudding like a heartbeat. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Begin. Ralcath moved first, his blade snapping into spear form as he lunged with blinding speed. Carter sidestepped, his movements economical, the spear tips slicing harmlessly past him. The crowd gasped, surprised by the human's agility. Ralcath recovered instantly, his blade transforming into a curved scythe. He swung in a wide arc, the weapon humming as it carved through the air. Carter ducked, the edge missing him by inches. He countered with a quick slash, his sword clanging against the alien's armor. The duel master's expression twisted into irritation. "You are delaying the inevitable." "Am I?" Carter quipped, retreating to a defensive stance. The fight continued, a dance of feints, parries, and near misses. Ralcath pressed the attack, his weapon shifting forms with fluid precision, each strike designed to overwhelm and disorient. Yet Carter remained elusive, his movements unpredictable, his counters frustratingly effective. "You're slower than I expected," Carter taunted, his breath steady despite the exertion. Ralcath's eyes narrowed, his pride visibly stung. "Enough games." The Zethro Fong morphed into its spear form, the weapon glowing brighter as Ralcath lunged with lethal intent. Carter saw the moment of overconfidence, the subtle shift in weight, the slight overextension of the strike. He moved. Pivoting on his heel, Carter sidestepped the thrust and brought his sword down in a controlled arc. The blade struck the spear's shaft with a resonant crack, forcing Ralcath to stagger back. The crowd gasped, the duel master visibly shaken. Carter didn't press the advantage. Instead, he stepped back, his expression calm. "You should have gone for the kill." Ralcath's fury was palpable, his pride now a weapon against him. The duel master snarled, his grip tightening on the Zethro Fong as the duel reached its crescendo. The amphitheater was silent, the crowd holding its collective breath as Carter Hale stood his ground, steel blade glinting under the artificial sun. Across from him, Ralcath Tyro seethed with fury, his crimson eyes burning with humiliation. The duel master adjusted his stance, his weapon shifting seamlessly back to its default sword form, the edge glowing with a menacing red hue. "You should have stayed in the dirt where your kind belongs," Ralcath growled. The Zethro Fong's glow intensified, pulsating like a heartbeat. Carter's gaze didn't waver. "And you should have learned that pride doesn't win fights." The duel master snarled, lunging forward with a ferocity that shook the ground. Carter braced himself, his steel sword intercepting the alien's weapon in a clash that sent a shockwave rippling across the arena. Sparks erupted where their blades met, the energy of Ralcath's weapon crackling violently against the raw durability of Carter's steel. Carter sidestepped a sweeping strike and countered with a precise thrust, aiming for the joint of Ralcath's armor. The duel master twisted away just in time, but the move forced him to retreat a step. The crowd erupted in murmurs, disbelief washing over them. A human, a species considered primitive, was holding his own against the galaxy's most formidable duelist. The battle continued, each clash of blades a testament to their vastly different styles. Ralcath's strikes were elegant yet overwhelming, his weapon constantly shifting forms to create new angles of attack. Carter, in contrast, was methodical and unrelenting, exploiting every opportunity to disrupt his opponent's rhythm. Ralcath lunged, his blade elongating into a whip-like tendril. Carter ducked, narrowly avoiding the weapon as it lashed the air above him. He rolled to his feet and slashed upward, forcing the alien back. "You fight like a cornered animal," Ralcath sneered, circling Carter. Carter wiped sweat from his brow, his breathing steady despite the exertion. "Funny thing about cornered animals," he said, his voice calm. "They tend to bite back." Ralcath roared, his weapon transforming into a massive scythe. He swung with brutal force, the blade carving a deep groove into the arena floor as Carter leaped aside. The move left Ralcath momentarily off balance, and Carter seized the opening, delivering a swift strike to the alien's shoulder. The blow didn't pierce the armor but staggered the duel master nonetheless. As the fight dragged on, it became clear to the spectators that Ralcath's frustration was mounting. His attacks grew more aggressive, his movements less precise. Carter, meanwhile, remained focused, waiting for the perfect moment to turn the tide. Then it came. Ralcath transitioned his weapon into its spear form, the Zethro Fong glowing brighter than ever. He charged, aiming for Carter's heart in a final, decisive blow. Carter's eyes locked onto the duel master's stance, noticing the slight overextension in his stride, the telltale sign of overconfidence. Carter pivoted just as the spear lunged forward. The Zethro Fong's tip missed him by a hair's breadth, embedding itself into the ground with a thunderous crack. Before Ralcath could recover, Carter stepped inside his guard, his steel blade flashing in a controlled arc. The tip of Carter's sword sliced through the mechanism connecting the Zethro Fong to its hilt. Sparks flew as the alien weapon sputtered, its glow flickering erratically before fading altogether. The weapon fell silent, severed from its wielder. The crowd gasped, their disbelief palpable. Ralcath stumbled back, staring at his now useless weapon in stunned silence. His invincible Zethro Fong, the symbol of his supremacy, had been neutralized. Carter didn't press the attack. Instead, he lowered his blade, giving his opponent a chance to surrender. "It's over," he said, his voice steady but not without a hint of respect. "Walk away." Ralcath's eyes burned with rage, his pride refusing to let him concede. With a guttural snarl, he charged bare-handed, aiming to tackle Carter to the ground. Carter sidestepped the lunge, using Ralcath's momentum against him. The duel master crashed to the ground, and before he could rise, Carter's sword was at his throat. "Yield," Carter said, his tone firm but not cruel. The arena fell into a tense silence. For a moment, it seemed as though Ralcath might defy him, but the realization of his defeat finally broke through. The duel master's shoulders slumped, and he closed his eyes. "I yield," he said, his voice barely audible. The arbiter's voice echoed through the amphitheater. "The victor is Carter Hale of Earth." The crowd erupted into chaos, a mixture of cheers, jeers, and stunned disbelief. Some alien delegates rose to their feet, applauding reluctantly, while others stormed out in fury. Carter lowered his blade, stepping back as the tension in the arena dissolved. Kailash approached him as he exited the circle, his silver tendrils swaying in what could only be described as approval. "You have done the impossible, Terran. You have humbled a legend." Carter shrugged, the weight of the duel beginning to settle in his muscles. "He underestimated us. That was his mistake." Kailash's gaze lingered on him, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Perhaps. But you proved something greater today, that strength is not merely in the weapon but in the wielder." In the days that followed, news of Carter's victory spread across the assembly. Humanity's reputation, once mired in doubt, now commanded newfound respect. Delegates who had dismissed Earth began to reconsider their opinions, and alliances previously out of reach now seemed possible. Ralcath, disgraced but not broken, withdrew from the public eye. Rumors circulated that he had returned to the Trevel homeworld to reflect on his defeat, though few expected him to remain silent for long. As for Carter, he returned to Earth a hero, though he rejected the title. For him, the duel had been about more than glory, it had been about proving that humanity, for all its flaws and limitations, belonged in the galaxy. Standing on the observation deck of the embassy's ship, he watched the stars stretch endlessly into the void. Lennox joined him, his expression lighter than it had been in weeks. "You did it," Lennox said, clapping a hand on Carter's shoulder. "Yeah," Carter replied, his gaze still fixed on the stars. "But this is just the beginning." The days after the duel were a blur of accolades, celebrations, and diplomatic overtures. Humanity's ambassador, Lennox, found himself besieged with invitations from alien delegates who had previously avoided Earth's representatives. For the first time, humans weren't dismissed as a novelty or underestimated as a fledgling species. They had earned a place in the galactic stage, but for Carter Hale, the weight of that recognition was heavier than he'd anticipated. Carter stood on the edge of the embassy balcony, the lights of the alien capital city stretching far into the horizon. The sky above shimmered with unfamiliar constellations, a reminder of how far he was from home. In his hand he held the hilt of his sword, its blade sheathed but still carrying the faint scratches and nicks from the duel. The soft sound of footsteps drew his attention. Lennox approached, his usual diplomatic poise replaced with a rare expression of gratitude. "You've been hard to track down," he said, joining Carter at the railing. Carter smirked faintly. "Needed some air. All those galas and speeches aren't really my scene." "They're not mine either," Lennox admitted, surprising Carter. "But they're necessary. Your victories shifted the tide, Carter. Delegates who wouldn't give us the time of day are suddenly eager to talk trade agreements and alliances." "Glad to help," Carter said, though his tone lacked enthusiasm. He stared at the distant skyline, his expression unreadable. Lennox studied him for a moment. "You don't seem thrilled. This is what we wanted, isn't it? Respect, a seat at the table?" Carter sighed, setting the sword hilt on the railing. "It's not about that. I just keep thinking about Ralcath." Lennox raised an eyebrow. "The duel master? He'd have killed you without a second thought if the roles were reversed." "Maybe," Carter said quietly. "But he's not a monster. He fought the way he was taught, believed in the traditions his people built over centuries. And I tore that apart." "That's the point," Lennox said firmly. "Their arrogance needed to be challenged. You showed them that humanity isn't weak or irrelevant." Carter turned to face him, his eyes sharp. "Did I show them we're not weak, or did I just show them we can destroy their pride if we have to?" The question lingered in the air, and for once, Lennox didn't have a quick response. Carter turned back to the city, his grip tightening on the sword hilt. Later that evening, Carter found himself back in the training chamber where he had prepared for the duel. The room was empty, the hum of alien technology a faint undercurrent to the silence. He walked to the console, scrolling through archived footage of past duels. One clip caught his eye, a young Ralcath in his early days as a duel master, his movements precise but not yet polished. The determination in the alien's expression mirrored Carter's own during the duel. He paused the video, staring at Ralcath frozen mid-strike. Trying to learn from the past? A familiar voice asked. Carter turned to see Kailesh entering the room, his silver tendrils shimmering in the dim light. The historian moved gracefully, his gaze curious. Or are you seeking answers that cannot be found in data? Maybe both, Carter admitted. He gestured to the screen. He wasn't always the invincible duel master. He earned his title, just like I earned mine. Kailesh inclined his head. And yet you carry a burden he does not. Why? Carter hesitated before answering. Because I don't want this to be about proving we're better than them. I just wanted them to see us as equals. Kailesh stepped closer, his tone thoughtful. Equality is rarely granted willingly. It is earned, often at great cost. The duel master may despise his defeat, but in time, he will respect what you represent. And if he doesn't? Carter asked. Kailesh smiled faintly. Then that is his burden, not yours. The following day, Carter was summoned to the assembly hall. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Delegates from dozens of species gathered to witness the formal acknowledgement of Earth's place in the galactic community. Lennox delivered a speech that was both diplomatic and triumphant, his words highlighting humanity's resilience, ingenuity, and capacity to overcome the odds. Carter stood silently by his side, uncomfortable with the attention but aware of its importance. When Lennox finished, the assembly erupted into applause. Carter noticed some delegates clapping reluctantly, their expressions tight. Others seemed genuinely impressed, their postures open and inviting. It was a mixed victory, but a victory nonetheless. As the ceremony concluded, an aide approached Carter, whispering that someone wished to see him privately. Carter nodded, curiosity piqued. In a secluded chamber, Ralcath Tyros waited. Gone was the ornate armor, replaced by simple robes that made him appear smaller but no less imposing. His crimson eyes bore into Carter as he entered, though the fire in them had dimmed. You requested this meeting? Carter asked, keeping his tone neutral. Ralcath gestured for him to sit. Carter hesitated before accepting the offer, his hand never far from the hilt of his sword. For a long moment neither spoke. Finally, Ralcath broke the silence. You fought well, Terran. Better than I anticipated. Is that why I'm here? For a backhanded compliment? Carter asked. Ralcath's lips twitched, almost forming a smile. No. I wanted to see the man who humbled me. To understand him. Carter leaned back, studying the alien. What do you want to know? What drives you? Ralcath asked. Your people are new to the stars, yet you fight as though you've known war for centuries. Carter's expression darkened. Because we have. And not just against others, but against ourselves. That's why we're good at adapting. Survival isn't new to us. Ralcath nodded slowly. Perhaps that is your strength. You thrive in chaos, where others falter. It's not something I'm proud of, Carter admitted. But it's part of who we are. Ralcath rose, his towering frame casting a long shadow. You have given me much to consider, Terran. Perhaps defeat is not the end, but the beginning of understanding. Carter stood as well, meeting the duel master's gaze. It's only the beginning if you're willing to learn from it. Ralcath inclined his head, a gesture of respect that surprised Carter. Without another word, he turned and left, his steps echoing through the chamber. As Carter watched him go, he felt a strange sense of closure. The duel had been a moment of conflict, but its aftermath held the potential for growth, not just for Earth, but for the galaxy as a whole. Returning to the embassy, Carter finally allowed himself a moment of peace. The stars outside the window seemed brighter, their light a reminder of the vastness that lay ahead. The duel had proven humanity's strength, but the real journey was just beginning. And Carter Hale was ready for it.